Hello and welcome to episode 1 of tlblue, your fortnightly cybersecurity podcast focused on important cybersecurity news for Australian organisations. My name is Brad Morgan. I'm the Security Operations Centre Manager at Triskel Labs, and today I am joined by Richard Granger, who is the Global DFIR Lead with Triskel Labs. Richard, what have we got on the agenda for today?
Got a couple of topics to run through today, Brad. So we'll be starting off by having a little bit of a look at what's happening in the ransomware space, in particular for Australian organisations. The US government's CISA has allegedly also been impacted by a breach. So we'll discuss that. We've seen some postings from a threat actor trying to sell 14 million Australian email addresses. So we'll delve into that a little bit as well. Vulnerability of the fortnight is Team City. And finally, we'll just be wrapping up by talking about some of the things that we've been seeing in both the SOC and DFIR over the last fortnight.
Perfect. Sounds like it's going to be a very nice group of topics to discuss there. Look, let's kick this off. Let's cover off on topic 1, which is the ransomware group activities.
Yes, so we're seeing a fair bit of uptick in lockbit activity. So everyone might be aware that over the last few weeks there's been a bit of activity. UK's National Crime Agency took down Lockbit for a period of time, at least anyway, and seized some of their infrastructure and sort of played a bit of their own game back at Lockbit, where they had countdown timers and things like that, where they were going to reveal information about the people behind it, affiliates and stuff like that. But they're back operational again. We're seeing postings of new organizations on their new leak site infrastructure as well. So it looks like they are back in action, despite the efforts by the NCA as well as all the sort of partner organizations across the world.
Yeah, look, I mean, it's not really surprising, is it, when you don't take down the primary admin? These places, these organizations are big business. If you're an MSP out there and you're hit by ransomware, you can do everything you can to come back. And these threat actors, they're making the same kind of money, if not more, than most MSPs out there. They're going to do everything they can to come back operational and make up for lost time. So
yeah,
that
absolutely
scary.
Speaking of making more, also sort of some hot news is ALF-V, also known as Black Cat, one of the quite notorious ransomware groups at the moment. So their site has gone down, and it looks as though they tried to make it seem like they were seized by the FBI, and that's sort of why they've gone down. But there are some other tales out there indicating that it might be a bit of an exit scam. So an affiliate has claimed that ALF-V withheld a payment of $22 million that they received following the Change Healthcare ransomware attack. So interesting what's going on there.
Yeah, look, and I mean, when I read into this, there's some concerns there that the affected organisation, in this instance being Change Healthcare, they've paid the ransom, but the ransom hasn't gone through to the affiliates who are holding the data. So they've received some decryption keys and some stuff to try and get themselves back online. And I saw something in the last 24 hours that they've brought a critical system back up. So they're no longer relying on paper-based. But, having the affiliate out there holding that data, what's the implication there now? There is going to be some other considerations, I think, that need to be made for change now.
Yeah, and that overall attack on Change Healthcare, obviously we're not really impacted too much by it down here, but from listening to stories and reading articles and things like that, it's a big issue over there for a lot of people that are reliant on that for like healthcare. Like if you're going to buy a prescription or something like that, you basically couldn't, and that's why relying on that paper-based backups and things like that. So not a great time.
No, exactly. Now I believe that we're starting to see a lot more victim organisations being published by Black Basta, Play, and 8base as well.
Yes, definitely a bit of an uptick in activity from those groups. So essentially there's a tool out there called Ransomwatch, which is a really good tool developed by someone in New Zealand as well, across the pond, which will index these ransomware sites. So you can basically see when a victim organization is posted, and that's basically showing that there has been a lot of activity. Those groups in particular seem to be quite on a bit of a spree of compromising organizations.
Now, this isn't one that's on our list here, and I am giving you a question without notice. I apologize.
That's all right.
As I was preparing for this podcast today, I came across an article in the cyberdaily.au website. Black Basta names nearly a dozen Australian companies in a data leak. So there's a little bit of conjecture there that some of it could be old data related to other leaks, but a lot of it is also starting to look like new data as well. So I think that's going to be a developing story over the next few days, and organisations need to be paying attention to this.
Absolutely. I mean, it wouldn't be the first time an MSP has unfortunately been the victim of one of these attacks, and that has sort of filtered down into clients that they're hosting as well. I know we had a particularly large one last year that we were involved with, and we'll sort of just see what happens as more information comes out.
Yep. We'll put the link to that one in the show notes. And again, my apologies for a question without notice. It didn't quite make it into our prep.
Keep me on my toes, Brad.
That's what I'm here for. All right, mate. I want to jump into topic 2, the CISA breach. Now, we might smile and go, haha, CISA. But at the end of the day, this shows that no matter who you are vulnerable to this stuff. I mean, CISA is the one out there that told all government agencies to get Avanti off the internet, and they've still fallen victim. So can you share some wisdom with us on that one?
Yeah, so it seems that though there have been sort of journalists that have been talking to like sort of unnamed sources and also directly to CISA as well, who have essentially sort of confirmed that there was a breach of their systems. It sounds like it might have been they were able to access 2 systems on there. Some of them, the anonymous source said that it's like infrastructure protection gateway and some chemical security assessment tools and things like that. So potentially some, sort of sensitive information on there. But obviously we sort of won't really know at this stage until, CISA want to publish more information about the attack if they want to, I guess, as well. Yeah,
look, I mean, there was some really, really good information that came out of CISA and the ACSC recently around Avanti. And I think we have an inkling as to why it was some really, really good research, is they were, doing instant response on their own infrastructure. So, they had firsthand knowledge of what the attack looks like. And it is, I see this as a very good reminder to all organizations. You're not immune. And if there is a critical vulnerability out there that is on internet-facing infrastructure, you've got to jump on it and you've got to fix it. No one's immune.
Yeah, 100%. Like, you could have all the security tools in the world, but it's just that initial foothold that makes all the difference.
That's it.
So, I mean, it sounds like they contained it pretty quickly, which that might have been through defense in depth and things like that. But if that vulnerable appliance wasn't there or it was patched, that likely this wouldn't have happened.
Exactly. So so pretty much all we can say on that one, mate. It's another month. It's another combo list. We had mother of all breaches last month, which was a lot of hot air, realistically, from a cybersecurity standpoint. Not trying to undersell these things, but they're combo lists for a reason. But there is another one here. Did you want to dig into that one for us?
Yeah, so there's been a posting on one of the Clear Web hacking forums, I guess, that's frequented by threat actors looking to sell data and access and things like that. Essentially, they're saying that they've got 14 million Australian email addresses and addresses that they're trying to sell on the forums. There's been some analysis done by people in the industry and having a look at what the content is and sort of cross-referencing some of the sample data from it with other breaches in the past. And there does seem to be a bit of crossover there. So as you alluded to before, combo lists are a thing where a threat actor will collect data from a myriad of different breaches, put it all together, and you got a nice list. But interestingly, there is also some people that are saying that there is, I guess, a fresh data in there as well. So it might be, some combo lists with some new data sprinkled in as well.
Yeah. Yeah, look, that's an interesting one. Is it legitimately fresh data, or is it something that they've, been able to just create some new data? We've seen that quite a few times with these combo lists in the past. So, look, the important thing that I picked up on here is the details out there are, first name, last name, email address, address, city, state, postcode, mobile number, and date of birth. There's no passwords in this one. So a lot of this data is things that people are putting into websites very, very commonly. I mean, it's something that I've had to train my 14-year-old not to go and do Facebook and other surveys. Where did you grow up? What's your pet's name? All of this sort of stuff that when Facebook first launched, people were doing all the time. Yeah. Trying to harvest that kind of information. So it's a good reminder for people just to remember what they're putting out there. And why they're putting it out there. Does it really need to be put into a website to gain access to a service?
Yeah.
Cool. All right, let's move on to something a little bit more juicy. Let's jump into the vulnerability of the fortnight. And in this instance, we're looking at CVE 2024-27198, which is Team City. Did you want to jump into that one in a little bit of detail?
So Team City isn't actually something that I'm that familiar with, but sort of from what I'm able to ascertain, it's a CICD platform, which stands for Continuous Integration and Continuous Delivery. I'm not a programmer, so it doesn't mean much to me, but from what I understand, it's where you can have multiple changes to code. So if you've got a team of people working on something, it's very handy for that. But the vulnerability is essentially related to Team City, which is the CICD platform that's developed by JetBrains. And essentially the vulnerability was to allow a remote unauthenticated attacker to take control of the server with admin privileges. So not great.
No, not great at all. And there's some interesting background around this one. Rapid7 initially discovered the vulnerability and attempted to work with JetBrains to do some responsible disclosure. So if people want to have a bit more of a read into this, I will put the articles in the show notes. But it just shows maybe if you're using this tool, you do want to have an understanding of what their processes and policies are behind the scenes around this one. It also makes me question organizations that do go out and release proof of concept. Rapid7 did release a pretty well featured proof of concept using interpreter on a target Team City server as well. So it did allow abuse of this one pretty quickly out in the wild.
Yeah, it's a tough one. The responsible disclosure is obviously good, but also I think the upside of something like this going out and getting a lot of information behind it and becoming news is that people we actually need to do something about this. It's really, really bad. Whereas, if it's just a newsletter coming from JetBrains saying, hey, security issue in this, you need to make sure it's patched. Not everyone's going to be reading those vendor newsletters.
I agree. Look, we had the same thing, and I'll go back to Avanti, had the same thing with CISA and others saying, get this thing off the internet, and people still not responding. So I do agree within reason that there are things that need to be done. Having a security vendor such as Rapid7 go and push out a POC, personally, myself, I don't like it. But hey, if it gets attention to it, it gets attention to it. So yeah, it's something I want to look into a lot further around that one myself, understanding when these things come through.
Yeah, well, we'll have the links. Both Rapid7 and JetBrains have both got sort of timelines on their own websites and stuff like that. So it's interesting read to have a squeeze through.
It is. It is. All right, let's get off of that one. Let's go into topic 5. Some of the things that we're actually seeing in our monitored environments. So this is from SOC 2 DFIR, a couple of these. So in the last few weeks, we've had Pikabot come through. So can you give me a bit of a breakdown on that? I know we touched on this on a recent CyberYears episode that's going to be coming out soon, but let's cover it off in this forum as well.
Yeah, so Pikabot's kind of a bit of a new malware variant that's sort of been getting a lot of I guess press over the last few weeks as well due to its prevalence, where essentially main sort of vector of getting the malware onto a machine is through a hijacked email chain. So whether someone's had a mailbox compromise in the past and the threat actors obtained a copy of those emails and they're forwarding them and changing dates to make it a little bit more likely for someone to click on it. But yeah, essentially it's containing an attachment, and which from the ones we've looked at is a zip file, and in there is basically a script. In our case, it was HTML files, which will reach out to threat actor controlled infrastructure via SMB and attempt to download a file.
Now, I know with saying that, I know in our environment, the hash wasn't picked up by the EDR tools. And these are some of the leading EDR tools out there. One of them was what is considered the market leader. But thankfully, the detection that allowed us to pick this up in the client environment was the outbound SMB connection. So can you just touch on why that might be the case, that we're not necessarily seeing this being picked up by EDR?
Yeah, so it's really going to be like the second stage of the attack. That's where you'll be hoping it be picked up by an EDR. In the cases that we had, they had outbound SMB blocked at the firewall. So it did attempt to make that outbound connection, was unsuccessful. But essentially, once it reaches out and downloads that next file onto the host, that's where you would hopefully have a detection coming through from an EDR tool. Where it's like, all right, well, this file's a bit sus. It's doing some strange things. But I guess even if it is not able to download that file, like let's just say the threat actor has removed it or something like that, one of the other sort of potential risks of this kind of malware is that it can disclose the NTLM hash of an account as well. And the risk there is if the user has a particularly weak password that can be cracked via the hash, it's essentially going to open up an opportunity for the threat actor to use those credentials to access anything external they have. So if they're an organization that have RDP exposed to the internet, which we know there are, but hopefully
there's not, but yes.
Yeah. Or a VPN without MFA is potentially initial access vector there as well.
Yeah, no, you just touched on something that I find quite interesting there. Luckily, the organization in question here had SMB outbound blocked on the firewall. If this asset had been sitting at home on someone's home network, say a work from home type situation, and the traffic wasn't routed through an always on VPN or something to bring it back through the corporate firewall, then that outbound traffic, I'm assuming, would have gotten straight back out to the threat actor's infrastructure. Yeah,
absolutely. Like if it's sort of relying on a home user's internet connection, not a lot of people will have their own firewall set up at home to block stuff like that. So yeah, every chance that it could have gone out that way if it was just connected straight to their own connection.
Cool. So yeah, I think there that sort of drives for me the importance of organizations that do have work from home or have the ability for users to take laptops out of the corporate environment, making sure they are using always on VPNs or some other way of routing traffic back through their corporate firewalls just to maintain that level of protection.
Yeah, absolutely. Like firewalls are such an important part of what we do sort of after the fact, after a breach. There's just the amount of evidence that you can gather from that, particularly when it comes to like data exfiltration. Having all of that in one spot is very useful.
That it is. And look, that kind of leads me into the next item, because I know, again, having a standard IP address is critical to this next one as well. And I want to touch on MFA bypass using session tokens. We're starting to see that a lot coming through from the SOC as well.
Yeah. So I guess MFA was, kind of the gold standard. That's what everyone in security was saying. Make sure you have MFA. We still do. We're
Yes.
not saying don't.
No,
but
you must have MFA.
still use MFA. But yeah, essentially what's sort of happening there is it's kind of seeing a lot of adversary in the middle attacks taking place. And what they're doing is they are actually getting the victim to authenticate to M365, and then they're collecting that session token, which essentially they can just take that and pump it into their browser. There's plenty of tools out there that can do it. And then they're able to actually authenticate as that user using the stolen session token, bypassing MFA.
Yep, and it's very, very quick, very, very easy, and very, very effective. There are services out there that will spin the infrastructure up for actors to do this, and they can do it all in one window. It's not a dismembered process the way it used to be 3 or 4 years ago. It is all very effective in one window these days. So look, I mean, what controls can organizations put in place? I want people to be able to take away actionable intelligence from this part of the podcast. We've mentioned routing traffic back through corporate firewalls. What else can we do? We know MFA isn't enough. What is the uplift that we think organizations should be putting in place?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things that organizations can do. One of them would be the type of MFA being used. So we've done some testing and actually written a blog post about this in conjunction with some of the offensive team, which will hopefully be on the website soon. And some MFA methods like YubiKey are actually quite effective at stopping this. So if you like Cam and the DFIR team, go out and buy yourself a YubiKey. But
look, I know some clients that have given all of their admins YubiKeys.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's expensive. Like it is expensive, but they did the risk analysis and said, actually, for our admins in this environment, we need to have YubiKeys. And I applaud them for that. It's something to consider.
Yep.
Sorry, I interrupted you there.
No, that's good insight. Conditional access as well is something that you can implement. So let's say your users are only based in Australia, they can only authenticate from Australia. And then if all of a sudden there's someone trying to authenticate from somewhere in Europe, that's not going to be allowed. Obviously, VPNs are a thing and can be used to bypass that. But that sort of goes back to what you were saying with the always on VPN, right? If your users are always on their own assigned machines and they can only authenticate from one IP, that kind of it's really good control.
Look, I mean, what you said about VPNs are good. VPNs are also bad. NordVPN, ExpressVPN, M24/7, all of these low-cost consumer-grade VPN providers out there, threat actors can automate the use of these things. They'll realize where your staff are based. It's not hard to find out once you look at LinkedIn and other things, or they know that you're an Australian-based org. It's easy for them to bypass conditional access when you're looking at geo. They simply spin up an Australian VPN and off they go. So having the always on VPN, having it so that in Intune you're only authenticating from Intune registered devices that are patched and up to date, and from the trusted IP address, I think is the number one way to block all of this. It's just making sure you've got those layers of controls in place. Yeah,
absolutely. Having a combination of all those things, you're in a pretty good position, because like a lot of the threat actors that are doing these kinds of attacks are business email compromised. They're very financially motivated. They want to get in, they want to identify an opportunity to intercept some payments, and that's done. They don't want to spend 6 months trying to gain access to your internal VPN so that they can authenticate to one user's mailbox. It's not worth the effort for them. So yeah, it's important.
Exactly. Anything to raise the barrier of entry at the end of the day. And unless you're critical infrastructure and you've got a really dedicated threat actor that wants to get in that door, they're just going to knock a couple of times and move on. So yeah, look, I think we've covered everything off on that one. Look, so that's all we've got today. Thank you very much for joining this episode of tlblue. Anything we've covered off will be in the show notes at the end. And if you've got any questions, comments, or feedback, please reach out to us at tlblue@triscollabs.com. Thank you very much for your time, Richard.
Excellent. Thanks for tuning in all.